It's a hard question. All right, so that's it. We've now considered three very different views of who should get what and why. But really, what we've looked at is a little bit different than that. It's really a little bit more than that, right? Because to say that something is unjust is more than just saying that it's bad, right? To say that something's unjust is to say, yes, that it's bad, but also that it needs to be changed. Okay, so here's a comparison between these two things. So you might think, suppose some bad person wins the lottery, right? Some real jerk. You might think, oh, that sucks, right? It's bad that some jerk won the lottery. Okay, so maybe think that's bad. But we don't think that's unjust, right? As long as the person bought the ticket and got the money, then there's nothing unjust about it. It's just bad, okay? Now compare that to the case where the lottery commissioner gives his cousin all the lottery money, even though the cousin didn't actually win, right? In that case, we think it's unjust. It's not just bad that the lottery commissioner's cousin got the money. It's unjust, right? It's not just bad, but it needs to be changed, right? We need to get that money back from the lottery commissioner's cousin, right? So to say something's unjust is not just to say it's bad, it's something more than that, right? So given that, the fact that Rawls, Nozick, and Nielsen would all agree that America, including Colorado, Colorado Springs, and so on, the fact they all agree that it's unjust is a very big deal, right? Rawls, again, would say that we're unjust, our society's unjust, because we could massively improve the position of the worst off. Nozick would say our society's unjust because there are lots of unrectified and or uncompensated injustices, both in the past and the present. And of course, Nielsen would say that our society is unjust because there's massive differences in people's autonomy based on the massive differences we see in people's political and economic power. Right? That's a big deal, right? Considering that to think that something's unjust is more than just to think it's bad. Okay, final thought. I know this has been going on pretty long. Final slide. Egalitarianism raises some really interesting general questions about value. And not only that, but about kind of the relationship between value and the individual versus value and things other than individual people. Here, let's see what I mean. So forget about Nozick for a minute. Right? Just talk about the dispute between Rawls and Nielsen. Now, we talked before about, so look at the graph off to the left there. We talked before about the leveling down objection, which basically, for our purposes, goes like this. It's that egalitarianism should be given up because, as we see in this graph here, to realize it would often require that we make everybody worse off and nobody better off. And that's just irrational or immoral or whatever. All right, now, Larry Temkin, he's a contemporary philosopher, pictured up there on the right, says that the leveling down objection, and just generally Rawls' arguments for the difference principle as opposed to full equality, relies on what Temkin calls the slogan. And the slogan says that one situation cannot be worse or better than another situation if there is no one for whom it is worse or better. Right? So this is meant to apply to more than just kind of societies and distributions, but to comparison of any two situations, right? Any two circumstances. Right? The idea is that for one situation to be better than another, that situation has to be better for at least somebody. Right? That what the slogan says is that all value kind of ultimately reduces down to something being good or bad for some particular person or being or whatever. Right, so if the slogan's right, then of course inequality to everyone's advantage is better than equality, right? Because equality cannot be better because there's no one for whom it is better. Okay, so that's the idea. Now, I think it's worth pointing out and thinking about the two kinds of challenge that the egalitarian could offer to the slogan. So Temkin himself is an egalitarian who denies the slogan. And I uploaded the piece from which the slogan was from. I uploaded that to recommended readings again. All right. But there's two basic kinds of challenge that we can make to the slogan. One thing we can say is that our well-being is partially constituted by our relationships to other people, and that we as individuals are worse off in a difference principle world than an equal world. Right? The idea here is that the graphs, as they appear to your left there, don't accurately capture what they're supposed to capture. Right? The idea is that an equality world it's better for me, for example, to live in an equal world than an unequal world. Right? It's better for you to live in an equal world as opposed to an unequal world. Right? Just as such. Okay, that's one kind of challenge we can make to the slogan. The other possibility, which is I think a little more radical, maybe a little more interesting, is to claim that things are still worse in an unequal world, even if no particular person is worse off. So that even if we allow that everybody in the inequality to everyone's advantage world, every particular person is better off, the world is still worse than it would be in a more equal world. And that's the other possibility. Now, again, I think both of these responses are kind of cool and are worth taking seriously, at least in a kind of philosophy classroom. So they raise very interesting and difficult philosophical issues. So regarding the first strategy, the first challenge, if we go this way, then that implies that things can make our lives better or worse, even if we don't care about those things, and even if we don't know about those things. Right? The idea here, right, the idea of one, is that being part of an unequal world makes you worse off, period, even if you don't know or care about the inequality. And even if you have lots and lots of primary social goods. Right? So the idea is that what's good or bad for us as an individual, for me as an individual, is not just dependent on what I know about or care about. Right? There's this other stuff that can be part of my well-being independently of my knowledge or care. But is that possible? Well, stay tuned for our next unit, which we start this week. We'll talk much more about this kind of thing then. Now, what about two, the more radical challenge to the slogan? Now, this might actually be Nielsen's approach. Right? One of the things he says is that we are not justified in believing that rational agents who have a tolerably adequate conception of fairness will always give first priority to being better off. They might very well, in conditions of moderate scarcity, recognize other things to be of greater value. Right? What Nielsen seems to be allowing here is that, yes, everyone really is better off in the inequality to everyone's advantage world. And yet, it might still be rational to choose the equality world, because the world is still, that world is still better, even though it's not better for anybody. Okay, that's the more radical proposal. Right? Now, can things be good even if they're not good for anyone in particular? That's a tough, deep question. That is how we're going to end this unit. So I hope you've enjoyed these topics, these readings, and gotten something out of it. Okay, that's it for today, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.